What is up, Jets Nation? Welcome back to Jets Media. We got a special guest on the channel today. You guys know him very well. It is Connor Rodgers. Welcome to the show, Connor. How you doing today, my man?
I'm good, Richie. Thanks for having me, man. Always good to catch up with you. We were joking off air. It's been a minute, so happy to be here.
It has been a minute, and I'm really excited to get you on here because you have been absolutely killing it all over the place in the media. So, Connor, give us a little update of where you're at, where you're working, where can people find you and expect to get, your perspective of the Jets and the NFL heading into this season.
It's an exciting year, and I'm really looking forward to this season for a lot of reasons. Not just because the Jets got Aaron Rodgers. We're all excited for that. I'm doing my full-time work at NBC Sports with Fantasy Football Happy Hour being a show that's going to be at least 5 days a week. Did that show last year with Matthew Berry and Jay Croucher and a lot of great talent that we work with. So we'll be doing that show this coming year. As soon as we get closer to the draft, I transitioned full draft national coverage for them. Got to do a lot of different interviews with prospects at the combine and all our draft coverage that's live. But for the Jets, I'll be back with SNY doing Jets pre and post game, which is a dream job for me, man. Obviously, living and dying with this team as a kid and getting to follow them this closely and analyze them on television as an adult with our great crew. Obviously, Gelb's our host, our other analysts, Bart Scott and Willie Colon. We have an incredible production team over there. It's an amazing time to watch this team. It really, really is. So happy to be doing that dream job for year number 2 this year, especially with all the headlines that this team has made. I can't wait for the season.
Absolutely, man. And as a fellow diehard Mets fan, and knowing SNY, loving Steve Gelbs as a Mets fan and seeing him the host of the SNY post game, when I saw you join that team last year, I got so excited. I'm like, Connor is representing the Jets on SNY. That is an absolute perfect mix. You, Bart Scott, Willie, it's an awesome show. I watch it every single week, so continue that great stuff. And guys, if you don't know this already, Connor is on SNY covering the New York Jets for pre and post game throughout the whole season. So you guys know where to check out Connor. He's doing his thing over there. So congratulations, my man. And I'm excited to see what you got cooking for this season. So let's get into these Jets, Connor, because this is wild as a Jets fan. The hype is everywhere. It's not just amongst the fan base and we're hyping each other up. Yeah, we could prove some people wrong. No, the whole national world is talking about the Jets in the same breath as not as playoff contenders, but dare I say championship contenders. And I'm not saying that, Connor. The outside world, the national media is saying that. So what's your overall thoughts as a Jets fan and an overall NFL fan? Can this Jets team live up to the hype of the outside world given this team?
Why not, right? Now, you don't want to always kick off the conversation with Super Bowl, especially after a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, no matter who is in town, right? I mean, really, as great as Aaron Rodgers is, and he dealt with some issues of his own last year in Green Bay, health-related. They had a big transition on that roster without Devontae Adams and younger wide receivers coming into play. But you have to be glass half full optimistic if you're the Jets, because when you look at this team's shortcomings last year, a large majority of them started at the quarterback position and the trickle effect that had. This was a defense that, as advertised when Robert Saleh got here, was going to be a strength, right? Saleh obviously led that 49ers defense. They were all the way to a Super Bowl. What he's been able to do, not only his ability to develop talent, but his schematically adjust throughout the years, really a cover 3 coach with roots in Seattle, now quarters and a mix of coverages and a mix of personnel packages. He needed that year to really turn this Jets roster over and use the draft and use free agency to get the players that he needed to really maximize this defense. And we saw that last year. That's a big step, right? Because you can preach to it, but that Jets defense was a really rough unit his first year as head coach. And then year 2, it's Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Carl Lawson returns, the Quinnen Williams breakout. CJ Mosley had a really nice year as well. Now they've even added more pass rush talent, especially rotational roles, not just Bryce Huff, but the drafting of Will McDonald. That's a unit that they think can be just as good as last year, if not better, barring health. And you look at the offense, right? This is a team that wants to run the ball, but now they have a quarterback under center that gives you passing firepower to match with Garrett Wilson, the return of Corey Davis, obviously the addition of Allen Lazard. They really like their tight end room. They feel like Breece Hall will be ready to roll this season. I still need to see that before I buy fully into that. I'm curious if they add another veteran to that room. But this is a team that they think is a complete roster. So why don't you start with high aspirations, right? For the Jets, they should be making the playoffs this year. We know how funky the playoffs can get, right? We've seen big upsets. We saw Skylar Thompson take the Bills down to the wire in Buffalo last year. Anything can happen in the postseason. So for the Jets, you just got to get in and then figure it out from there. And the most important thing, I think, Richie, there's a little something different to Aaron Rodgers since he's been traded to the Jets. I think he's got a fire in his eye. I think he wants to go out on top, a little similar to how Brady finished his career with the Bucs. Maybe not his last year, but Brady went to the Bucs and won a Super Bowl on his own. I think Rodgers has the same motivations.
And you transition beautifully into the next topic point, which is the man, the legend, the New York Jets quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. And I agree. I think outside of Aaron Rodgers as the football player and the quarterback of the Jets, he just seems to be in a really good headspace in his life. He just feels very content of having a brand new scenery, learning a brand new system. Well, not a brand new system, a brand new team rather, because he's in the same system with Nathaniel Hackett, which I think is a big reason why I have confidence that this offense is actually going to be very successful out of the gate. We'll get into that later on in the show. But don't you just see a different, like, Aaron Rodgers, smile on his face, going to Knicks games, going to Taylor Swift concerts? He's just enjoying his life.
Absolutely, man. It's a fresh start in multiple ways, right? Not only being in a bit, it's funny to me, and I fell victim to this too. When we had all the conversations months ago, before Aaron Rodgers was ever publicly on the Jets' radar, there was a lot of assumptions that he's a guy that likes his privacy. He doesn't want to be in the big spotlight. He's played in Green Bay his whole career, obviously an incredible football town, but a quiet place in terms of what you do away from football. He's got the West Coast mentality as well at his nature, at his roots. And everybody kind of assumed he doesn't want any attention. And he wants to be traded to the Jets. He's immediately at Madison Square Garden for Rangers and Knicks playoff games. He's out with different teammates. He's at Taylor Swift concert at MetLife, embracing being filmed by strangers, dancing to songs. I think a lot of people made assumptions about Aaron Rodgers, maybe because of a unique ending in Green Bay. It felt like there was a lot of friction there that lingered for a very long time, not just this last year. It felt like it built up many years before that. And maybe people had the wrong idea of what he wanted, what he desired, and what he embraces. And it's been a very, very fun situation to monitor with him in New York and how he's embraced that and how excited he is for more attention and expectations. And I think the most important thing to Aaron Rodgers and why you're seeing this mentality publicly and why you're hearing so many positive things within the building at the practices that they've been able to have this spring is that he's included in every conversation. And I think deep down, that's what Aaron Rodgers always wanted, not just personnel decisions, but he has a trust with Nathaniel Hackett that when he brings an idea or brings something to the table offensively that he feels more comfortable doing or he thinks they should check into or have the chance to check into, Hackett, obviously reciprocates those requests. He's somebody that'll hear him out. There's a trust level there that really, really matters. And it felt like Rodgers lost that with Green Bay last year. So it's funny, man. It's the same concept as a normal everyday human has. If you go to your job and you like your employer and you like your coworkers and you like what you're going into, you come home happy and you're happy away from your job. There's that trickle effect. And I think we're seeing the same exact thing on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis so far with Aaron Rodgers. Now, you got to win football games to keep that going, but who's going to doubt one of the greatest quarterbacks of our generation?
Say that again, because I think some people are forgetting that he is one of the greatest quarterbacks of our generation, and now he's on the Jets. All of a sudden, he's this type of quarterback, and I think that you hit it on the nail, man. There's something about Aaron Rodgers that's a lot of people thought he's not going to be able to handle New York. He's going to be doing this. He's going to not be able to handle the media. To me, he's built for New York City. He's built for the bright lights. He's embracing the city. He's embracing being the star. He's embracing fans coming over to him and saying what's up and just being that star of the city and just going in and being like the face of this franchise. And I think that his impact on this team is so impactful, not just on the football field, but in the locker room, in the meetings. I mean, you watch Flight 23 and you hear all the things that these players are talking about with Aaron Rodgers and just the mindset that he's instilling. And he's not only the quarterback of this Jets team, but you can argue he's being a coach a little bit. I mean, he's coaching up players. He's in the coaching meetings with Nathaniel Hackett. He is making his voice heard, and I think that his mentality and his presence is going to do a lot of good things for this Jets team this season. But I think for the long run, this could be a culture shift that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas deserves a lot of credit for establishing the culture to what it is today, to even get a personnel the talent enough where Aaron Rodgers would even want to come to the Jets in the first place. Because what if I told you 3 years ago, like, yeah, Rodgers kind of available, why would he ever want to come to the Jets? Well, you got to give Douglas credit. You got to give Saleh credit. They built this team to the point where Rodgers was looking around. He saw the Jets. He said, you know what? That team's talented. That team may be a quarterback away, and I might be that quarterback. So I think Rodgers could be that player, not only for this season to help him out, make a run, but I think he could really instill a mindset, instill a material day-by-day thing for this franchise for the long run. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's a phenomenal point. When you look at it getting sucked into the short-term picture, which is what obviously the media's job is to do, and those outside of the New York market like to do it as well. The conversation for the Jets is, are they going to be a really good football team this year and a threat in the AFC? And that's a conversation you have to have. But us, so Jets-centric at times, also look at the change and the makeover that this team has gone through, this franchise has gone through as a brand, as a franchise, as a culture. Those things really, really matter. And you go back to square one, which I really liked, is what things were like until Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh got here in terms of how the Jets were reviewed. You remember McCagnon, I think it's last free agency, all the money they had to give just to get C.J. Mosley to come here. They were so over the market compared to his second highest offer to stay in Baltimore. That was the mile Jets had to go. And you can't sustain that. That's not a sustainable strategy, because every big-time player, you can't give $5 million more per year or whatever it may be to get them to come here, because you run out of cap room. And eventually that's not a viable way to build a roster. You have to do it by its nature of the roots of the draft and scheme. And Rodgers has been very vocal about the scheme that he's played against with Robert Saleh, and that's something that is really, really important with this team. He was very vocal about the young talent that's been here. He's immersed himself with the young talent that's here. Obviously, the face of the Jets defense, it feels like already, is a second-year player in Sauce Gardner that just won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Obviously, on offense, Garrett Wilson just won Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Rodgers looks at a player like Garrett Wilson and goes, man, I had a great thing with Davante Adams for a really, really long time until it was over. Now you look at Garrett Wilson, and I'm not going to call Garrett Wilson Davante Adams, but you look at the ways that they win, the body type, very, very similar. Trajectory is dangerous because Davante is a pretty legendary wide receiver of these last 5 years, but Garrett Wilson is a phenomenal talent. He was my number one wide receiver in a loaded wide receiver class. The way he wins off the line of scrimmage, the way he understands timing, the way he works his routes, really understands how to sink his hips, his shoulders, his head, and he catches the ball at the catch point at a high point. He's an acrobat in the air. Those are things that Aaron Rodgers loves and thrives with. Rodgers doesn't always need a guy that's going to be 6'5" and be a jump ball bully, or a guy that runs a 4.25 and just wins down the field. Those things are great, but the nuances of the position really, really matter. And that's why I think those two are going to be in sync and are in for a big year. And of course, the image that's always in our head when the Jets beat the Packers by a pretty good margin last year in Lambeau Field, Breece Hall running away from the entire Packers defense. And listen, I'm trying to temper expectations for Breece Hall this year, because medical history outside of Adrian Peterson tells you that first year back from an ACL tear, there's going to be an adjustment period. There's going to be some pains there. There's going to be getting your feet back under you. Now, Breece Hall is a different cat. He's a pretty rare dude, so maybe he surprised us all. But I think the Jets are going in with the mindset, we need to be careful here, because we want the best version of Breece Hall in December and January. We don't need to run Breece into the ground September, or they really shouldn't, and October as well. So I think that's something that Rodgers looked at, though, last year and said, man, they have a pretty viable run game with a superstar in the backfield. They have a potential wide receiver one superstar already in Garrett Wilson. Rodgers likes having the big tight ends in the middle of the field. I'm curious to see what Conklin, Uzama, and more notably Jeremy Ruckert could do this year. So there's a lot of pieces out there that catch your eye. And it's most importantly drafting pieces, developing pieces that fit an identity. And the Jets, for the first time in a very long time, feels like they have an identity on both sides of the football.
And that is the thing that I love about this New York Jets football team the most. And I think you got to give Robert Saleh the most credit for that. He still 100%. Has to prove himself this season, right? As a head coach, he showed last year that he had some things to work on in terms of clock management. He also had some games in the beginning of the season that a lot of people forget that he managed the clock perfectly at the end of the game. And then at the end of the season, he kind of was inconsistent. So this is the season for Robert Saleh to prove himself as the head coach for this Jets football team. But me personally, Connor, I don't know about you, I'm sold on Robert Saleh as a person to lead this New York Jets football team. He is the right person to just really galvanize the locker room, be that player's coach, and just have a really good relationship with each and every player. And I'm really excited to see what Robert Saleh has in in store for year number 3 for this New York Jets. Not to mention his defense last year, going from last up into top 5. I cannot wait to see what happens this season. So I do want to transition to another topic point because I like to call you an NFL draft expert. And I think that this past draft class for the New York Jets is kind of being swept under the rug. Now, would you agree that this is probably the least hyped up draft class in Jets recent history? Because usually the draft is what we're excited about every offseason. Oh, we got these players, we got this players, but we got Aaron Rodgers now, and last year's draft class was freaking historic. So, not to say that Jets fans aren't excited about the likes of Will McDonald and Joe Tippmann and all the guys we got, but I think there's so much excitement around this team that Jets fans are kind of just like not as hyped up about this 2023 draft class. So, what's your overall thoughts about what Joe Douglas did in this draft class? Any sleepers that mentions, and Will McDonald as the first-round pick? What were your thoughts?
A couple things, right? Number one, it's pretty hard to have hype around a draft class when for 2 years you picked twice in the top 15. And then obviously this year you barely picked in the top 15 and you did it once. So by nature, and this was a down draft, everybody knew that. So by nature, it was going to be impossible to, redevelop that level of hype. And I think the second thing was this was a draft that was more about depth and lacking flash. And that is how usually good NFL teams are able to operate, right? How many years do the Chiefs come out of a draft and it's like, damn, look at all the Ferraris they got in this draft? That's not how they need to operate because Patrick Mahomes is there, Andy Reid is there, they have cornerstones on that franchise, and they don't ever pick it with an opportunity to do that. What the Chiefs like to do is they like to be able to shore up their trenches on both sides of the ball. They like to get guys that could be contributors as baseline starters or sub-package players, and on it goes. And that's why at the end of every year, it feels like they have rookies starting in their secondary and making an impact. So when you look at the Jets this year, right, they were looking kind of to add on to the foundation rather than rather having to lay a foundation, right? If Will McDonald's playing 95% of the snaps, something went horribly wrong for the Jets this year. You look at a lot of the offensive linemen that they've brought in outside of Tippmann. If one of those guys has to start the entire year, something went horribly wrong, right? Those guys are in situations that they might have to fill in for a game. They might have to start here. You might have to get through a half with that kind of guy because something went wrong. So it's a different way of living that the Jets fan is not accustomed to, and that's okay. I really think it is. I think at the end of the day, number one, Robert Saleh's built a scheme that will have more success when the Jets are playing with a lead. That's why things looked really, really bad year one for them more often than not. And then year two, you start to see them take the right step. Now at Aaron Rodgers here, you expect a massive step in year three. And why I say playing with a lead is it's an attacking front four that rotates their pass rushers to keep them fresh. And the secondary isn't left on an island as much as a lot of man schemes more often than not. You're really asking that front four to get upfield and attack, and everybody kind of holds the fort behind them. The linebackers play a lot of see ball, get ball. And most importantly, you need a stable of pass rushers for that to work, because if the rush isn't getting home, well, the quarterback has time to sit back there all day and pick apart a lot of different zone coverages and coverage looks. Now you have a rush rotation of Carl Lawson. I think Jermaine Johnson's going to take a nice step this year. Bryce Huff, I don't need to speak for him. He's an established pass rusher already with what he's had. And Will McDonald, another guy that can get after the quarterback in a variety of ways at speed on the outside. So it feels like, Richie, for once, they're starting to, put sprinkles on the ice cream or put new windows on the house. It's not, hey, we need a new floor. We need a new roof. Sauce Gardner, save us. Zach Wilson, save us. Elijah Vera Tucker and Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, save us. They didn't need to do that for once. And I think that's what created the reaction of, man, I'm not really excited about that draft. Well, will you be excited about that draft when that guy gets you through a vital quarter of a game, or Will McDonald has a sack in the second half of a game where you need to get the defense off the field? Then the narrative changes a little bit.
I agree, man. You broke that down exactly the way I've been looking at it, in the perspective that the Jets they added to what their strength is, and what Joe Douglas has been trying to say since he got here is prioritizing the trenches. And not to mention, we talked about Will McDonald. Well, his second draft pick was also in the trenches on the other side of the football in Joe Tippmann. And that's what Joe Douglas's philosophy is. And that's also what Robert Saleh's philosophy is building within the trenches. I'll never forget when Joe Douglas was asked the question, I think it was either last year or 2 years ago, about how do you get one of the greatest quarterbacks out of the game in terms of just how do you shut him down? Well, it's not by great secondaries is getting to the quarterback. It is pass rush, pass rush, pass rush. And the fact that the Jets going into the draft already had an elite, you can argue, one of the better defensive lines in football with the likes of Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson coming back after a really good season last year, coming off an Achilles, all the players you mentioned, and they still get another pass rusher to really add to this mix, who I think is going to be that fourth quarter closer, similar to what Bryce Huff did to Josh Allen in that Buffalo Bills game. I think that the Jets are expected to have a lot of leads this year in the fourth quarter, and they need a guy that's a pass rush specialist like the likes of Will McDonald to go after the quarterback. And I really like that you broke it down where, hey, last year was the time to really get all these sparks, get all the stars, get the Sauce Gardners because, hey, we had the capital to do that. But now we can just stay within, don't do anything flashy, build this foundation, and get Will McDonald, get hopefully the franchise center in Joe Tippmann, and then build through the draft. So absolutely love your breakdown on that. Now, I do have to just bring this up right here. These Aaron Rodgers throws in practice, Connor, I know they're in shorts. I know it's OTAs, but why can't I stop watching Aaron Rodgers throw this deep ball to Malik Taylor? Like, what's wrong with me?
Well, he does it in real games, too, which makes it a little easier to digest, right? It's not like you're watching a rookie or a second-year quarterback and going, man, I hope that happens when the pads come on, and it might be rainy, or it might be 40 degrees, or it might be a gust of wind at MetLife. It's like, no, we've seen Aaron Rodgers do that at Lambeau Field since since I was a little kid, which is crazy how long he's been playing. So yeah, I cherish your excitement and appreciate it and completely understand why it's justified.
Yeah, it is justified, right? Because that's where I'm getting lost here. I'm just like, okay, I have all these expectations for this Jets team. It feels like these past previous years, Connor, for me at least, I kind of have to convince myself, how can the Jets prove people wrong? Like, who's the quarterback? Zach Wilson? Okay, I'm hopeful. I got to kind of right. He hasn't proved himself. But, to have a quarterback that's established, that's a Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers, and, feeling myself getting this, it's just as I'm talking personally as a Jets fan, feeling myself getting over the top of wow, we could be crazy good this year, and then realizing that it's justified, where it's not this delusion, it's not this bias coming out. It's kind of like, no, the Jets are ready to go all in. As you broke down throughout this entire show, the talent is there at every single position group, and I think that we are loaded pretty much at the positions where you need to be loaded to make a run in the AFC. So I want to talk about the division, the AFC East, because the conference is stacked, but the division's pretty stacked as well. So what's your overall thoughts about the Buffalo Bills? Because they are the team to beat. They are 3 times AFC East champions these past 3 years. The Miami Dolphins obviously improved with the addition of Vic Fangio and Jalen Ramsey to that defense, and they made the playoffs last year. And then the Patriots, I know everyone's saying, oh, the Patriots are going to be in the basement this year, but they still got Bill Belichick. They're still the Patriots for all I know. So what's your thoughts of the AFC East, and do the Jets have a chance to win the division?
Man, it's the AFC Beast right now, right? When you look at this thing, you can make an argument for any of the 4 teams, and you set it up nicely that, New England is a team that I don't think you ever write off, no matter whatever their situation is. Their offense has to be better by nature. We know the defense will be really well coached up. They'll be a tough out because of Belichick's ability to really cover all his bases game plan by game plan. Now, you crank it up a little bit more. I say a lot bit more with Miami. Miami has this variable of, if you could just sit there and go, man, what if I had a healthy Tua the entire year? Mike McDaniel is an excellent orchestrator of offense. He's got Ferraris in the garage in literally every different size, color, whatever you want to call it, because you look at the speed that they have, and it's productive speed. It's not just, hey, this guy's fast at the combine. No, Jalen Waddle's phenomenal. Tyreek Hill, obviously, you know how good he is. You look at how deep their backfield is, especially adding Devon Chain from Texas A&M. They have questions on the offensive line, I think pretty significant ones, and questions about Tua staying healthy, but their skill group is unbelievable, and they have an incredible play caller in Mike McDaniel, and their defense is going to be tremendously improved under Vic Fangio. So Miami is a scary threat with a lot of weird variables that can make them a 12-win team or can make them a 6 or 7-win team, and that's a really big spectrum to live on. The Bills are the opposite to me. The Bills have a much higher floor. I don't know if they have the ceiling. I guess they always do because Josh Allen is special. I think with the Bills, they are in a situation where we don't know when Von Miller is going to be back. That's a really, really big piece of the equation, of course, for their defense. No Leslie Frazier this year. Probably an underrated aspect of how good the Bills have been for a while. But I always say it, until you beat them, You got to respect them. And sure, the Jets beat them at MetLife last year, but the Bills won the division, and the Bills have been at the top of the division right now, and they have a star quarterback that could take over any single game. So you got to give the respect to the Bills as the favorites that they deserve and that they've earned. So it's a tough division, and I said it so many times last year when talking about the Jets' playoff chances. You needed to at least split with New England, and they were unable to do that, right? They split with Buffalo, they split with Miami, but they didn't split with New England, and that's the difference in being 500 in your division or having a losing record and how the tides turn. On and on it goes. So for the Jets, you got to take care of business in your division to have a shot. Now, they absolutely have a shot. On paper, the Jets have a better roster than New England. Now, beating Belichick at least once, we need to actually see that. Should they? Yes, they should beat him twice, honestly, when you look at them on paper. But you need to see this before it happens. So it's a really, really tough division. It's an arms race in the division. The one thing you can hang your hat on with the Jets right now is that for so long you're looking at it going, well, Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the division, then everybody else just has to figure it out. You can confidently say Aaron Rodgers is at least the second best quarterback in the division, and there's no reason to think that there's not a chance he can't have a better year than Josh Allen. That's something that I don't believe Miami or New England can even convince themselves. Their own mothers can convince themselves as well. And that goes a long way when it's crunch time and you need a touchdown drive to win the game.
And that's something Jets fans are not used to saying. So doesn't it feel good? It feels good that we actually don't have the worst quarterback in the division. And another thing about Josh Allen, Connor, and now I'm looking at this from the perspective of just Bills versus Jets. I think the New York Jets have Josh Allen's number. Now, just basing this off of last year, I think
he thinks that.
He thinks it too. You go look at the numbers. Josh Allen's worst 2 games of the season was against the New York Jets. And I think we could have swept them if we had a better quarterback out there in that game at Buffalo. Mike White didn't crack his ribs. Joe Flacco fumble. Whatever. Quarterback nightmare over there in Buffalo. But I think this Jets team stacks up against Buffalo very well. I mean, the way we beat them at MetLife Stadium was just a staple of how good this team could be with just a quarterback like Zach Wilson at that time, just not making mistakes. He didn't have a turnover. He was relying on the run game. He was making the quick, easy throws, and the defense was making plays. So week 1, Monday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers' debut, Connor. What do we expect as a Jets fan going into that game?
Man, you got to be fired up, right? It's such a weird game to predict, especially as you and I sit here in the beginning of June, because so much can happen in camp. But by its nature, you feel like it's a game that has that early vibe shootout. Now, we know the defense is usually always ahead of the offense as the NFL season kind of acclimates itself and everybody gets comfortable. But you have prime time, you have 2 star quarterbacks, you have a division game, you have a situation where a game-altering player like Von Miller might not be ready to go out of the gate. You kind of look around, and to be fair, for the Jets, do you have big expectations instantly out of the gate for somebody like Will McDonald? I don't think that's very realistic at all. It might take him a little time to get his feet under him. Let's not forget, Bryce Huff wasn't even active the first couple of weeks of the last season, so pass rushers got to get acclimated as well. It feels like a shootout. It feels like a thriller. It feels like the classic, who's going to have the ball last and manage the clock effectively. And that makes it really tough to predict, a giant variable, but a lot of fun, because at the end of I look at it like this, right? And this is crazy to say, and maybe a lot of people won't agree with me. That feels like a game that a lot of pressure is on the Bills, because the Jets are the type of team with Aaron Rodgers' first year there. They should get better as the season goes on, and they should be a team that really views themselves as, we got to get a wild card spot and get in, and maybe we'll be playing our best football by then. I think with the Bills, there is this feeling of, we've come up short now for a couple years when, they were a Super Bowl favorite last summer at this time, betting favorite.
Yeah.
There's a little urgency there of, we need to win, and we need to win right away, and we need to dictate not only the AFC Beast, we need to dictate the AFC. We want to be a number 1 or a number 2 seed, and we need things to go our way right away. And we have some questions right now with our offensive coordinator. We have some questions with our defense. Great team. Should be the favorites. But I think a little bit more pressure is on the Bills, where if the Jets surprise them that week, everybody kind of looks around and goes, maybe the Jets are going to be really, really good this year. Because I look at 2 games, right, Richie? And maybe it's 3 if you count playing the Bills twice. If the Jets beat the Bills once and beat or hang with the Chiefs, why are there any doubts of what the Jets could be able to accomplish in January and February? Those are the two games that you can show the world. You know what? Calling us a Super Bowl favorite in May might have been rich and favored and dangerous and not something people like me love to do. Yeah. But if you win those games, you should be able to view yourselves internally and externally that you could beat anybody.
And those games both come on primetime and come in the first month of the season. So the lights are going to be bright for these Jets. I cannot wait. And I think that Bills and Chiefs game is a really good test for these Jets team. And I like that they got those games early on for that exact reason. Now, Connor, last quick question. I just want to get your thoughts, and then we'll get you out of here, because the one thing that Jets fans are waiting for the last news to make this the greatest offseason in a long, long time, which I have a lot of optimism that it's going to happen, is when will the Jets extend Quinnen Williams? Are you optimistic it's going to get done by training camp? And if it doesn't, is it going to linger on until the season?
I think it gets done by training camp. I do. Because there's no excuse for it not to. And that's not me taking a Quinnen side or me taking a Jets organization side. Both sides need to sit down and look at all of the deals that got done. Dexter Lawrence, a couple of miles down the street for the Giants. Jeffrey Simmons for the Titans. Jerron Payne for Washington. On and on they go. Ed Oliver's deal just got done, which we knew would be lesser than those guys.
Yeah.
Because he is not in the class of those guys. But Quinnen Williams' deal has already been outlined for you. It is right in that mold of where Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons, and Jerron Payne are. You don't really need to budge too far from those. And the sides need to come to a middle ground to get him that money, get him that guaranteed money. It's going to be a 4-year deal, which makes him a Jet for pretty much all of his prime as he sits here 25, 26 years old. And then you're sitting there and looking at it and going, okay, that was pretty easy. So it's kind of odd it's taking this long. It feels like the Jets have been doing a lot of cleanup work on their cap. They've restructured Carl Lawson. They've restructured Jordan Whitehead. They're making more cap space. They're going to have a big Aaron Rodgers restructure coming down the pipeline. They've added void years onto a ton of different deals, including both Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzama. They have done a lot of money moving and a lot of money management that tells me they are bracing themselves for two things: how Rodgers' cap is going to be figured out from this year and long term, and how a Quinnen Williams extension is going to look now and on the long and short term as well. So I think it gets done by camp. He's in camp, ready to go, and there'll be a lot of good vibes for the Jets as they report early this year because of the Hall of Fame game. Yeah,
they will be reporting early. I cannot wait to be there. I might be sending that to Ohio for that. It's going to be awesome. Nice. So SMR with the $5 donation quickly says, guys, one thing I know, Def have advantage over off first 5 weeks. Jets win by 13 against Bills. Yeah, Astamar, I agree. 13-point W. You heard it here first from Astamar. Thank you for the $5 super chat, my friend. So Connor, could not thank you enough for hopping on another Jets Media live show, my man. If you just want to give a little outro to the people that maybe are not familiar with your work, but if you're not familiar with Connor Rodgers and you're a Jets fan and NFL fan, what the heck are you doing? So Connor, let the people know where they can find you.
Sure, you can follow me at Connor J. Rodgers on Twitter. Jets pre- and post-game all season for SNY, and then the Jets podcast I do is on Patreon called Badlands. So it's all right there, man. And I always enjoy talking to you, and thanks for having me, dude.
Always a pleasure, Connor. Love to have you on again sometime in the future. Guys, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. We appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into another Jets Media live stream, and I'll catch you guys next time, and let's go Jets. Peace out, everybody.